All right, yeah, let's get started.
This is a special Board of Education business meeting for which adequate notice under the Open Public Meetings Law was provided by written notice on January the 30th, 2008 to the Courier News, the Echo Sentinel, the Reporter, the Star Ledger, the Clerks and Borough, Watchung, and the Townships of Long Hill and Warren. Can I have a roll call?
Mr. Binder?
Here.
Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Mr. Falzerano? Mrs. Fechner?
Yes.
Mr. Horowitz?
Here.
Mr. Pepe? Mrs. Mandel? Mr. Sun?
Yep.
Dr. Yagged?
Here.
Dr. Steelig?
Here. Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Circuit says.
We can move into reports and presentations. Do you have any, Dr. Strongman? Mr. Stiles, I'm sorry, I don't have any comments. Mr. Stiles, do you have any comments? Or do you want, I guess we're going to open it with the budget presentation, is that right?
Right.
Okay. This is the first, for Tony, for your sake, nobody else is here, but this is our first budget presentation for this year. This is a, we'll probably, if the board approves it, we'll probably approve it tonight if the board is willing. That allows us then to send it to the county if we have to, and we can then, in the future, if we still need to, make further modifications to it. So with that, we can kick off into the budget presentation. Who's going to lead off? You or?
We're going to go together.
It's a team effort.
We do it eventually. But I'm thinking, I was halfway there. I used the word if.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Steelig, President, and members
Can
of
we,
the...
Fran, before you continue on, can I suggest that you get to the mic over there?
Okay.
Okay, and somebody else can provide you.
By the way, just nothing for nothing, do we have wireless microphones? I have one. So maybe
We could do that in the future.
look into that, yeah.
We're lucky we've got the audio right now. So, go ahead, Fran.
Okay, good evening, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Steelig, President, and members of the community that have chosen to attend our first presentation on the budget. I will start out by saying that a good deal of hard work, energy, and effort from members of our Board of Education through the Finance Committee, our Business Administrator, Tim Stiles, myself, Dr. DeGancy, members of the administrative team, put a tremendous amount of energy and effort into making this what I'm going to call a very good budget, a budget that focuses on students and student needs. Next. The goals that we operated under in terms of preparing this budget, we wanted to continue to enhance and refine our academic offerings, however, not grow new programs. We also wanted to address facility needs. This is a much larger facility now as a result of our expansion. We want to continue to infuse and maintain technology throughout our program. And we also wanted to effectuate efficiencies within the operation of this very, very large facility. As you can see by this chart, and as you know by just walking around the hallways, we have many students. As you can see, the steady progression of our student body from 2002 up to what we project for 2008-09. Those are actually not projections, but the actual students that we know are in the middle schools now waiting to come up to the high school. This year we will see an increase of between 95 and 100 students if we do not accept many new students during the summertime.
Is there any way that can be sharpened a little?
Just check the focus on the,
Okay.
probably the
Because I asked our
Little-
elder experts.
a little fuzzy?
previous back here.
A
That
little-
looks better, much better, much better.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. We are expecting an increase of 95 to 100 students this coming school year. The next 2 years, however, will be our largest growth spurts, if you want to put it that way, because we've had many growth spurts along the last 7 or 8 years. But the largest growth spurts will be coming 2 years hence. that will bring us to the projected number of students between 25 and 2550 for the year 2011-12.
Some of the things, keep clicking on that. We got slick with the graphics here. Some of the things that we had to deal with this year in terms of challenges, I guess, in putting this budget together. Some of the state mandates that we all, as districts, have to deal with. PERS is the pension for the public employees that are not teachers, your maintenance folks, your secretaries. The boards of eds pay the employer share for that. The teacher's pension, the state picks that up. Over the years, the last 4 or 5 years, we were billed at 20%, 40%, 80%, and next year it's going to be 100%. So that threw a large increase into that particular line item. In the budget, we have an increase of almost $100,000. That's a mandate. That's by law, and we have no choice on that one. The 4% tax cap, that is a tax cap on revenues, not on budget, as per se. It has become much, much tighter and much more difficult to move around that. We did calculate all our cap waiver opportunities. We did do that. We came up with about 240,000. One of the things that was very difficult in the cap waiver process is that if you use that, it heavily restricts your ability to deposit money into a reserve account. And a reserve account is an account, if you want to think of it, an account you need for a rainy day. So that really made it very, very difficult for us to apply for a cap waiver. Furthermore, applying for a cap waiver was, they threw so many restrictions on how to get that approved. One of the things is you had to have the thing approved by the 15th. That's kind of why we have a special meeting tonight. That was the first hurdle. Second hurdle is that there's a plethora of information that they needed, including trend analysis for 3 years. They wanted analysis of your surplus for 3 years. So there's a lot of things that they were going to review in terms of enrollment, spending, line by line, that didn't guarantee you were going to get that cap waiver. You could get it, you may not get it. So it was not an easy process. So that was a big component in getting to the point we are now. You know, do we go for the cap waivers or do we not go for the cap waivers? And for the good of the district, we decided that we should not go for the cap waivers and remain at 4% of the cap and try to defer some things and cut back as far as we can. The state aid, we did get 10% state aid, that is true. But again, state aid in our district is a very small percentage of the budget. Go back one. We only get $1.5 million or so, so 10% of that is $150,000. So that's $150,000 of new spending money that we have. That's not a large amount of money. One of the slides later on, I show you that it gives you the percentage of state aid versus local tax levy. And therein lies the problem here with a flat percentage increase. That helps us. I'm not saying it doesn't help us. It's nice to get any increase, but it would have been nicer if it was a little more than 10%. Our needs as a district, we're projecting a little over 90 students. Obviously, we're going to need more teachers to handle that. There are facility costs that we have to worry about. We do have a projection of 7 to approximately 10 to 11%. Now it's at 15% with the utilities. I wish that was a little lower, but I don't know. I can't say that anybody here at their home is paying less than last year, so it would be nice if we could, but it's not the way it's going to go. We're negotiating now for a new teacher's contract, and also the other folks that are in that unit. That's a big factor in this budget. Legislative mandates, there of course is special education. That's a big component of our budget. I don't think I have to go through it. One student can cost well over $100,000. It would be nice if the IDEA money that handles that particular cost would be funded at the percentage it was supposed to be. You know, actually, it was supposed to be funded at 40%. That was the legislation back in IDEA. We don't get 40%. It's not even close.
Do you mean above 40,000?
It was supposed to be, no, the IDEA is the federal grant. We were supposed to get 40% of the funding for special education. That has never come to fruition, not even close. We get $300,000. That's just a tiny bit of that cost.
The other thing is the state reimbursement, Tim. That's a different issue.
Yeah, the state reimbursement.
We're supposed to get, if we have a special ed student over $40,000.
Right.
We're supposed to get that reimbursement from the state plus transportation.
Right, that's extraordinary aid, and they don't fund transportation at all. But they, for students over $40,000, we're supposed to get a percentage of the extraordinary aid. We don't get that. We haven't gotten that a great percentage. It's always a small percentage, 15, 17% in that range.
Just a second, Tim. Rob, for our viewing audience on the recorder, if you get to a microphone when you're talking, just so they can hear you, otherwise I'm afraid it's going to get washed out, okay?
Wanted to mention some of the efficiencies that are already part of this budget and have been part of the budgets. We currently are part of a buying consortium for natural gas called ACES. It's really a 2-year commitment we have with them. ACES uses a cooperative purchasing with a group of school districts, and Jerry's smiling at me. What they do is they try to mass the buying power and use that to purchase gas at a cheaper price. We do use cooperative bidding. We add our purchasing power together with the software we have to buy supplies and teaching items that we use, smaller items, and that process has worked very well for us. We do use shared services. One of the shared services we do have is transportation. We work with Watchung Borough, transport their elementary students, and that works out very well for both districts. There are other shared services. We do pooling with our insurance. We have, for our liability and workers' compensation insurance, we pool with other school districts, and that helps us in terms of our claims experience. We share with them, and we share with districts of larger size, some smaller size, and that also helps us in getting a better rate. You're not just looking at your insurance claims, you're looking at everyone else's. And generally, in that area with a school district, you generally have pretty decent claims experience. Next slide. And I'll pass it on to Fran because she's going to talk about the new teachers.
Well, as we said, there are new students coming. We are still experiencing growth in our district, and what we've tried to do in this budget is try to address the areas specifically that we wish to be sure that students had adequate teaching staff. In the arts, the addition of 1.6 teachers will help us to maintain the arts program with the number of students that we have currently accessing that program. We will hopefully have the ability to have additional sections in the fine and performing arts. In English, you know, every student in the school takes English all 4 years, so 1.4 teaching staff members in English is required to help us meet the needs of our growing student population. A part-time teacher in world language, 0.4, that's basically 2 teaching sections to address the needs of students who will be taking world languages. Science, additional 0.4, 2 teaching sections, and an additional 0.2 or 1 teaching section in health and physical education. A full-time 1 teacher for resource room for students with disabilities, which brings us to a total of 5 teaching positions that will be funded through this budget. We also have the need of an additional nurses, or I should say a nurse's aide, in addition to the 2 nurses we currently employ, and that nurse's aide is recommended to be brought on half-time. In technology, our budget addresses our needs for student management and parent support software. We have begun a process of changing from our student management database to a different database that will also incorporate many parent support issues, and that will cost us approximately $17,000. We also are going to be replacing some laptops and some desktops because we have exceeded in many cases the lifespan of these pieces of equipment to the tune of $215,000. We also need a backup server and other infrastructure that needs to be developed here to accommodate our school systems, which would be about $21,000. So as you can see, this is somewhat of a maintain and support greater areas of technology through the student management and parent support networks that we'd like to put forward in this budget. We have already begun that initiative this school year. Tim is going to continue with operating. Yes.
I just had two brief questions.
Sure.
The first one, the student management and parent support software, is that Genesis?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the program we began this year.
Okay, and then going back to the staff,
Yes.
the world language and science, are there particular courses that those are backing up, or?
Basically, the world languages will be accommodating some of the new student growth that's coming in French, German. But again, it's not going to be adding any additional sections or any additional levels or programs.
So that would be for French and German?
Just to maintain what we have.
Okay.
And your other question was science?
Yeah.
Basically biology. So it's that, again, trying to keep even, because we have the, our labs accommodate 24 students. So it's not the type of situation where it's like, say, in history or another class where you can schedule 25 or 26. When you have a lab station, you do need that station for students to be able to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. This particular slide is a presentation on a real global look on our budget spending. One of the things that always jumps out, and as it should, salary and benefits is 73% of our budget. No surprise, because this is a service industry. That's what we do. The bulk of our budgeting, at least the bulk of when you start out with the budgeting, is always on that component. You really want to make sure that you have it accurate and you have all the most updated information you can possibly get, because that's the biggest part of the budget that it always, in terms of a business administrator, you really want to make sure you're accurate as possible what you have and make sure you have all the staff counted for. And of course, that's what drives the budget. That's a big part of it. Our benefit increase, our projected benefit increases, based on our experience claims, is 15%. That's what's in this budget. Again, that's a big number considering the size of it. And you'll see later on one of the number slides where it just compares the actual salaries and benefit numbers, the amount of increase that from one year to the next, that when you look at that line, and you look at your cap, you see how much money, how restricted you are in terms of adding different items in that budget, adding new textbooks, new supplies, new facility items. Next, Dan.
Hey, Tim, do you happen to know of the salaries and benefits, how much is administrative versus teaching?
Yeah, I have that information.
Rough numbers.
Yeah,
off the top of your head, would you know it or not?
10% of the budget is administrative cost.
Okay.
So if you take out 10% of that.
Does don't they do a check on whether your administrative costs are?
Yeah, there's two caps. One of the caps is the 4% revenue cap, the tax levy cap. The other cap is administrative spending. There's three areas in that budget that you cannot exceed. One is zero, by the way. One is central office, which is superintendent's office and my office, district technology, and then also the central office with the principal's office. So there's a cap on that, and you can't exceed your per pupil cost from last year to this year.
So we've met that, we're under that cap, right?
Yeah, thanks, Fran. Fran mentioned that legal expenses are included in that category.
Okay. But we're under that administrative cap?
Yeah, we are under that cap.
Okay, thanks.
And this was the slide I was talking about. In pure numbers, salary and benefits is 24.8 million, and that's approximately an increase of $1.7 million. So if you look at $1.7 million, our total cap is about $2 million in the operating budget. $1.7 million is salary and benefits. So that doesn't give you a lot of opportunities to add things in those other lines. And that's how the breakout is for each particular line item. 7% of the large number, the salaries and benefits, $1.7 million, that makes up the bulk of what we've added to the budget. And that's based on, you're talking about 5.5 new positions, which accounts for, and I think it's in the booklets, $360,000. The rest of it is just, your projected benefit cost increases and salary increases. Just a look at the operating revenues. Again, one of the things that kind of jumps out you, and one of the reasons I was complaining before, I'm sorry to say, is the local tax levy is a big portion of this budget. State aid is 4.7%. And that's the issue with our state aid increase. If you're a district who gets 40% state aid and you get 10%, well, that's a nice number, and that allows you to add things into your budget. Well, we don't have that luxury. We have 4.7%, which is about $158,000. That's not a lot of new money. And when you're strapped with a 4% cap on top of that, you got to get creative in other areas. But it's kind of hard in a school district to get that creative in other areas. We do have tuitions. We do receive for special ed and for Greenbrook our sending. We have some miscellaneous revenues, which is a small portion, $130,000. That's what we budgeted. We're trying to increase that, but you can see our big issue: small amount of state aid, large amount of tax levy. Thanks. And here's the numbers portion of it. Shows you the other revenues that we do have. Again, tax levy, and I want to throw this one out again, we are at 4% tax levy. That is the cap. There are no waivers. That number right there, and that's the number for taxpayers to focus in on. That's what between this number here and the number for last year, compared with the 06, 07, and 07, 08 numbers, will determine what the tax increase is for the three towns. The total increase in spending overall is 6.3%. Okay. And I'm going to pass it again back to Fran.
Thank you. What we did was we took a collection of similar type districts that are of similar size, the largest on that grouping being Hunterdon Central. Watchung Hills, as you can see, with regional districts that are similar in makeup to us, is still considerably less than most other regional districts of similar size and district factor grouping, with West Morris being the next closest to us with a student population of about 1,500 currently.
Is this total, just total dollars in the budget divided by total number of students? Is that
Basically.
This is comparative data provided by the state of New Jersey, and it is
report
total dollars compared. Yeah, it's the total budget divided by the amount of students that they have in the district.
Is it total, but it's not transportation, is it, if it's the state data? Isn't it just the
No, they
education?
No,
exclude
without
transportation,
transportation. Right. And tax levy, Tim?
We're moving us around, so you guys can't get used to one voice. This is a slide that shows you the tax levy increases over the past 5 years. One of the things, probably cap-driven, but also the Finance Committee, I know, was very committed to ensuring that that number keeps going down. If you go back to 04-05, we had a 14.9% on the tax levy. And you look forward, you jump ahead, that line is going south to the 4% cap that we are allowed by law. This is the tax impact for the three communities. One of the things I do want to point out, I do not, and I know there was an article in the paper, in the Echo Sentinel, what I do not have is the equalized values that the county provides to us. We were given information by the townships and the borough of Watchung based on assessed values, which don't necessarily have the equalized value. The percentage splits were provided by the state of New Jersey. They've shifted slightly, again a little bit less with Watchung Borough, and the two other ones were slightly increased, Warren and Long Hill. Our average home data was provided again by the townships and the borough. Average home, $714,000 for Warren, $718 for Watchung, and $390 for Long Hill. And the information based on that, we calculated the increases for the average home in each of the communities. You can see Warren 133, minus 41 for Watchung, and Long Hill 106. The only trick with this calculation is that the average home, when you're comparing it the calendar years. You're really not comparing the budget years. So half of that increase is for last year, and half of it is for this year. And then you have the other thing that always makes it kind of tricky to me is that when the towns assess or reassess, then the value of that home is now different. So it kind of makes this calculation a little bit tricky to understand. You almost have to look at your own home and look at the rate changes. I think that's kind of the best way to do it, especially because when you come out and you say your increase for an average home is this, if you can't apply that to your own home, because your own home may not be the average home. It may be lower, maybe higher. But anyway, purely on the rate per $100 of assessed value, we have an increase of 0.2 cents or 2 cents in Warren, less than a penny in Watchung decrease, and then a little bit more than a 2 cent increase in Long Hill.
Just to be clear, though, this, and if you could do me the favor, I think this is an annual increase, right?
That's right.
It doesn't say it on the slide, and
Okay.
if you could just put annual, because I'm used to sometimes seeing monthly increases that may be looking like that.
Yeah, this would be an annual increase based on the data we have. And again, I think probably
Quote, annual tax impact on the top to make it very clear.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And I think when we have more of the data, I know Bernie had sent me some information, which was very complete, and I'd like to go through that. But I think I'd like to carry through with that analysis, because I think that probably was a little more helpful.
Tim, I'd just like to reiterate, and I don't think we have any newspaper people here, but this chart, if it were to go to someone in the newspaper or to be spread around, it doesn't have all the qualifiers. The qualifier is that this has nothing to do with the equalized value. It's the best estimate you can do right now.
Right.
But I think that has to be made very clear if anybody were to see these numbers, because what they call the equalization ratios do change in the towns. And
That's right.
And from one year to the next, it could change.
Yeah, that's right. And that's right. That's a good point. We don't have all the information. This is really a best guess at this point in time. Yeah. Just a few calendar items I just wanted to point out, just so you're aware. Tonight we have the initial presentation and hopefully the adoption of the budget. From that point, the board would be adopting a preliminary budget that's going to be handed into the executive county superintendent. And the executive county superintendent, we have to give that budget to them by March 6th. That's the deadline. It was the 15th if you did cap waivers. We didn't do that. So March 6th is the statutory date. We have on for March 25th our public hearing. That's the meeting where we come up with the final budget for the 08-09 school year to vote on, or for the voters, I'm sorry. And the election this year is well-timed on April 15th. I think that's it.
And again, one of the things to point out that Tim, I think, mentioned earlier is that there are no cap waivers in this budget, which meant that we left close to $250,000 in additional spending that we could have taken with the waiver process, albeit as difficult as it is. But the fact that we stayed within the 4% tax levy without using any caps, I think is very significant, especially for a district that's in a period of growth as we are. So, you know, this has really been a tremendous effort by the Finance Committee, Mr. Horowitz as chair, Dr. Seelig, Mr. Fallon, Mr. Binder, Mr. Sun, all worked very unselfishly and tirelessly in trying to understand all the nuances as they came through. Tim certainly worked very, very hard in putting together the hard data. I said our supervisors, our administrative team, were in this process elbow deep, which is something that I've been trying to foster over the last several years, getting them more involved in this process and really making it a process for them so that they do understand what the trade-offs are, especially when we're working within the confines of state-imposed mandates and still with a growing school. So I do appreciate your kind attention, and certainly we would like to answer any questions you may have at this time.
I just had one question about your student count, Fran. Does that student count that you showed include all the parochial schools? I mean, those children as well?
Actually, our student count is based upon the students that are in the public middle schools at this time. So it is a little conservative.
So it's conservative.
A little
It could be
conservative,
higher.
yes.
But how many are leaving, too? Doesn't that always factor in?
Yes, that's the net change.
Other questions?
So,
Couple. The technology equipment that we're purchasing, is that replacement or additional?
Replacement.
The old surplus equipment then, is there any avenue for resale of that equipment or getting some kind of?
There's a couple that I know of. As a Board of Education, we could auction it and sell it to the highest bidder.
So there's an avenue to get something
You
out of
c-
that?
Right, and you can also we're members of the cooperative bidding with the county. They'll auction it on our behalf, take a percentage, and
Okay.
that's some other revenue we could find, I guess.
Second question is, over the next year, if we find additional revenue through advertising or something like that, what effect does that have on the budget next year? Is that, we have to show that as income, and does that affect the cap and everything, or?
The cap that we have is on the tax levy. It's not on spending. So any additional revenue we can find will help us in adding things to our budget if we so choose. In other words, if you can find another avenue or another revenue, it'll allow us to either expand our programs or cut the tax levy, one or the other. But yeah, it's a very, any other revenue, with this budget, the way it's formulated, if you can find other revenues, you're that much better off, and a lot of boards are doing that. A lot of boards are getting aggressive with the advertising. They're getting aggressive, and some boards have gone into other avenues too to raise revenues. One of the things that we're trying to do here and reflected in our budget is rentals. We're trying to make use of the facility as much as we possibly can, and charging folks, make sure we're charging the right amount of money. So that, yeah, that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought it up, but it's a very big component going forward in all New Jersey districts.
Question, Bernie?
Jerry?
I've had my chance. I did have one question, but I mean,
Go ahead, Jim.
I'll ask it. On the one thing that I saw that came to my, and I noticed as you're going through the operating revenue slide where you had surplus from 392 up to 734.
Yes.
What does that do next year, though, when you have to, don't you have to make that money up if you're taking surplus and applying it towards, doesn't that leave you a gap in terms of next year's budget that you have to overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's any form of revenue that you have on this budget that goes down. The fact that the tax levy cap is so stringent the way it is, you got to make that up. So either we're going to have to find a way to make that, if we can't generate that much surplus, we're going to have to find it from another source, or we're going to have to cut down to get to make up that gap.
So next year, $300,000 in the hole before you start the budget at all, zero.
That's
budget,
right.
You still have to increase.
Yeah, that's right.
$300,000. I know that's the sawtooth thing that scares me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and I think that's something that like to work with the Finance Committee on a little bit more, is I think when you're budgeting, especially when we have a large tuition base like we have, something like a 5-year planning is almost essential anymore because of avoiding the spikes like you're having, or the reliance on a certain piece of revenue. And we're definitely concerned with that. I wish it was lower, but statutorily we're already strapped with the $600,000. We have no choice. That's excess. It has to go back into the budget.
Bernie?
I had one other comment, really a suggestion for the next time you put these tables together. You have one that's the budget summary by classification, where you show, by expenditure type, I'm sorry, you show salaries and benefits. I think it would be very important to split that up into salaries in one line and benefits in one line, because when you think about it, your salary component is probably growing only around 4% or 4.5%, somewhere in there. The fact that that component is going at 7 is that ought to wake everybody up to the problems we're going to have. If this keeps happening, there ain't going to be any money for salary increases. If the cap is 4% and you're spending 7 here, can't go on.
Actually, that's a good point, because the question came up in finance, and I think that's something that on my next, maybe I'll update that and send that out, because that's easy to do, but I think that's a good point.
Bernie, you had a couple points on the slides. Any others?
No, I don't.
Okay. Cindy?
I guess I really have to clarify in my own head as I'm watching the percentages of the increases going down, and I know the numbers of the students are going up. Is there any number, without going for cap waiver, that the law allows us to say, okay, you just got a tremendous percentage growth, or do we always have to go for waiver because of growth?
Not anymore. We used to get enrollment aid based, in fact, we got enrollment aid based on that continual rise, but we don't, we have to
It's
go
not there
forward.
anymore. So in the meantime, that 4% cap stays regardless of the increases of we're in a growing district, or Warren particularly is growing. So there's no relief for us from that 4% cap without
just
going.
the state aid, the additional 10% that we got of
but
the
that's 10%
state aid,
from
which
nothing.
is a very small number.
I didn't realize that, by the way. I thought, oh, you guys are getting 20%, and I looked at the final budget, and I thought, where is that million going to come from? And then it deflated my balloon, my dream there. So that we are going to be stuck if we continue. I guess there will be a line, because the state's never going to increase, as we in the past have had 4% and 9%, and that's when we made a lot of changes and growth and development within our curriculum, within the building, within a lot of things. So we're going to be on a hold for a long, long time
a lot of things hit
with
at
the
the same
growth
time.
and the percentage.
You know, the thing that's interesting is when you go down and look at the elementary school data trends, those trends are either level or falling.
Yeah.
So once we hit our max of the 25, 50, the years subsequent to that should begin to stay even, and at some point maybe decline. But that's a pretty long way out.
And historically, we've been in that before.
But we'll be stabilized at 25, 50.
No, we were at 2,000, we went down to 1,000. So that can happen, and that's another big problem, even with budgeting.
Okay, thank you. Peter, you had a question?
Fran, one of the things you mentioned to us was the not going for the cap waiver now. And as I understand it, if we look up at this slide with the 24 million in tax levy this year, if we had gone for the cap waiver this year and gotten another 240,000, that all would have ended up on the tax levy line.
That's right.
And so therefore, we would have been asking the townships for a 5% increase in our tax levy rather than a 4%,
That's
right?
exactly right. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Bernie?
Just one more, as Columbo said. How much in this budget how much do we have for the cost of implementing rotating drop schedule put in this budget? What is the approximate dollar amount that we've built into this budget should we move in that direction?
I believe for some cafeteria tables, additional tables, cafeteria
There's
tables.
about $150,000
So you-
on the lease purchase that we have in the budget for the cafeteria tables, and also some infrastructure changes to, quite frankly, more for the lunch than anything else.
No, I realize that.
And we do have a few dollars that we had to put in, approximately about 5 to 10, I believe, for a little extra, the custodial, for the cleaning, because we're going to have to focus a lot of our cleaning efforts on that one period of time. So we're going to need an extra person during the day.
But those tables are on a lease purchase, so it's not a full, it's a 5-year.
But the spending is actually between 150 and 200, somewhere in that ballpark.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions at this time? Thank you, Tim and Fran. With that, we can move on to, let me see, we're budget presentation. We can go to the first opportunity for public comment on agenda topic items. Do you want to comment? Tony, can I ask you to come up to the microphone, because we are being recorded, and if you could give us your name and your address.
Sure
I
will.
appreciate it.
Tony Adario, 59 Rock Avenue, Watchung. The number that I saw up there, cost per pupil, which was 12,000 something per pupil on that, compared to all the other districts. I look at that number, and then I look at what the state is supplying to Newark, Asbury, where they're spending 18,000 per student. My question to you is that 12,000 per student divided into the 25 million or into the $33 million? And I'm rounding numbers out.
It's divided into the whole budget, and the only thing they will exclude is the cost for transportation.
Okay, so it's into the 33 million minus the transportation.
Less transportation.
Less transportation. But that, the only thing I want to tell you is that the comparative spending guide data is always a year behind. They haven't calculated all that for, so that's last year's. It's not necessarily the 33. It was last year's version of the 33.
All right, that's very, very interesting. The other question, of course, I had, you say the taxes in Watchung are going to go up 0.001.
Down.
Down. I couldn't see the minus on that. Is that established, or you haven't got the equalization yet from Somerville?
We haven't gotten the equalization.
So when that comes in, that's going to change more than likely, based on past experience. Because people have been calling me up. That's why I'm here tonight. I didn't even know there was a meeting, and I run into them, and they know that I've been a busybody in the past, and so I came to see, what was going on before you finally adopt the budget. But it's very interesting. And my other question, I'm not even going to bring that up tonight.
The usual Tony question.
Well, no, that's, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've already had the board discussion, and is there any other discussion that you want to have at this point in time with regard to the budget? Or anything else that you might want to say?
I have a textbook question.
Go ahead.
I'm just always concerned about textbooks. I know historically that's been a problem for us, having enough textbooks. Is there a component of it that's like by the internet or e-text or anything?
That's a good point, Laura. What we're trying to do with our textbooks is maintaining class sets, and then to start moving away from purchasing of expensive consumable books. Because consumables, we would think, would be something like $10 or $20 per book. Well, we're talking more like $50 or $60 per book. And we're trying to encourage our department heads and our administrative team to move away from using those sources and use online sources. That way students can work at home on them. They don't have to carry a book around. They don't lose the book. So that is something we're really, I know none of your students
do
ever
we
lose
pay
books,
fees
so.
for subscription, for these kinds of services, I would imagine?
Well, right now it's becoming such that we have to identify various vendors that are not the textbook companies, because the textbook companies themselves will not sell you a license for a particular consumable book unless you purchase one copy. At least that's the way it stands now with the vendors that we use. So we're looking for vendors that are parallel or alternate sources to similar kinds of information that would be much more cost effective.
Any other questions, Cindy?
Going on to the textbook, I'm going to piggyback on this. We know that there is a great movement to try to reduce the weight of the textbooks, the fact that so many of our youngsters are being injured physically by the weight of the backpack. It was a wonderful idea when they started, but the publishers got very clever and they made their books heavier and heavier. If we go online, we can reduce the carrying weight of our youngsters, which I think would be when they're 40 years old, they're not going to be in trouble bone-wise. That would be a tremendous advantage if we can go in that direction. And talking to some publishers that I have to know somewhere else, they said they feel the future will be everything will be online. It's going to be a paperless school involvement as well, so that it may not be while we're all sitting here, but we're heading in that direction. And hopefully we can help it along. It could be economical, it could be for our kids' health, and we could be on the cutting edge.
They've used the online books for physics and for chemistry, I know, for the last 2 years. My boys have been through it, so I've seen a lot of it, over the last 2 years. And not only is it, I know all the other benefits you talk about, but it's also, I think, personally a better educational experience for the young kids. Questions are richer in content.
Interactive.
They're more challenging, more interactive. So I just give you a
I know there's also opportunities. I haven't seen it so much in the high school. I've seen it at the elementary level, where the kids can take review sections before they have a test. So I assume that we have that capacity
We actually
too.
do that now with many of the courses through WebAssign. That's a way that the teachers can have the students do tutorials in various subject areas based on WebAssign.
You've got a question
Any
behind
other
that.
questions, Peter?
I just wanted to let some of the other board members know, as well as our one representative of the public tonight. One of the things that the Finance Committee, and more importantly our administration, had to deal with this year that was even more unusual than other years, is the budget software from the state comes later and later every year. Tim didn't get the second part of it literally until last Wednesday or Thursday. Despite that, the Finance Committee was able to meet, I think, three or four times last week with him. And as Rob will tell you, our whole administrative team has done an outstanding job in making this a process that we could get our hands around much more easily than in the last few years that I've been both on and watching this board.
Do we have a line for R&R for him so we don't have him on 2 feet?
He needs it. He needs it.
Any other questions, comments at this time? Eric?
By looking at the slides, talk about this technology. I think the one for computer is 245K, not the 215. And
Yes, thank you, Eric. We folded everything together.
I see.
I want to take a look.
Yeah,
We'll check
You know,
them
there's
out.
laptops and desktops together.
You're right.
We'll check them out.
right. And the other one is I really urge the school to look into that. In terms of the laptop, it's really, I believe it's more for the portability. And in terms of 150 and the 50 for desktop, really carefully to see if we wanted to, for the purpose of the portability or not. As I know, the desktop is always more sturdy and more powerful in terms of that, even though we have the same kind of CPU, for example, but somehow the laptop is always a little bit slower.
Yes.
So we just want to point out.
So you're suggesting looking at, or considering shifting some of the laptops
Yes.
to desktops in terms of the
And I
long-term
suppose
support.
the desktop you got should be a lower price compared to the
Yes, it
laptop as
should.
well.
Yes.
Any other comments? Yeah, okay. Any other comments at this time?
Yeah.
Rob, do you want to make a comment, or I'm going to move it on to the action items? You could-
Well, I was just going to,
Okay.
was that time I was just going to,
Yeah.
before making the motion, sum up and,
Fine.
yeah, a lot of what I am going to say has been said. I think the most important, some of the most important aspects, this really was a collaborative venture with a number of us on the Finance Committee, Paul, Pete, Eric, Jerry, myself, with Tim and Fran, and just really want to also acknowledge, I feel, and I think I'm comfortable speaking for all of us involved, that I truly feel that the numbers that were given, the effort of Tim, our business administrator, this is his first budget process, are sound. We can take faith and comfort in the numbers. We specifically asked, it's as difficult as it is to prepare a budget. You want to make sure that the assumptions, you can always make assumptions on the revenue side or the expense side, which will give you a rosy picture. So we really, especially Tim, very tough and being really conservative on all aspects, including the revenue and expenses. And I think really the most important outcome of this budget process, all of us are residents of towns, of the four towns, and really balancing the need of providing and continuing to provide an outstanding educational experience for all of our children, whether the children are graduating and going into the workforce, whether they're going to a 2-year college, community college, a 4-year private school, public school, Ivy League, whatever it is, that our kids will be prepared. And I think also I just want to recognize Fran, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but we did get in the board package testing data. I don't know if you've all had an opportunity to see that, comparing Watchung Hills to a number of schools, in our county, and I think, unless I misread it, but I don't think I did, that there have been some dramatic increases in the scores of our children, Fran, and I think that's something that perhaps the next board meeting you'll spend some time, amplifying on. So really, balancing the what we all want in the education for our children the best. I mean, there's nothing more important as adults than making sure our kids are well prepared for the world out there, with also recognizing generally, the financial constraints. And I think in particular, this year is a very, very difficult year. We all, day doesn't go by where you don't read about some problem, internationally, nationally, with our state finances and within our own personal finances, how tough things are. So we're not sitting here, although today, there's not a lot of folks. I think we really, in crafting this budget, we're very cognizant of the fact that we want to be very supportive and understanding of the needs of all the people in the towns, whether you have children in the school system or you don't have children in the school system, so that we can take pride. And just 3 or 4 quick statistics. And I think these will appear when we have a public presentation. If this is the 5th year, the prior 4 years of tax increases averaged 9%. This year, as you know, it's going to be a 4% tax increase, a 50% reduction. The last 4 years averaged a 9% increase in the operating budgets. This year, it's a shade over 6%. And all that's happened this year, as Fran and Tim mentioned, an increase of almost 5%, or we estimate 100 kids coming to our school. And I think just the final point we'll make, where we had about a $2 million increase in expenditures, virtually all of that. I don't know, Tim. It looks like it might be almost 90% of that $2 million went to contractual salary increases, benefit increases, health insurance, and also utilities. I mean, we're obviously at the school level, we're not immune like everyone else, all of us are, seeing the increased gas and electric costs. So with that said, I would like to, would that be appropriate time, Paul, to read the motion, or starting with, and be it resolved, further resolved? Is that it?
Yep, that's it.
And I guess I'm making a motion, the language, if I have this correct, and be it further resolved that the school business administrator be authorized to submit the tentative 2008-2009 budget with any additional appropriate adjustments to the executive county superintendent for review and approval.
Second.
Okay, hold on. You want to read the first part. You got to go back to the very page before that.
Hold on a second, Sandy.
And be it further resolved, further.
The board approves a tentative
2008, 2009.
Yes.
9 school budget as follows?
Yes.
You want me to read these numbers?
You don't have to read them all.
You don't have
Okay.
You
I'm
can just say
okay?
it was-
We're,
Done.
okay.
Okay,
I
so everybody knows
didn't
what's
botch
going
this
on
up
the
too
front page and
badly.
the back page of this resolution.
Okay.
Any discussion on that? Do I have a second on that first of all?
I'll second it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we have a
Thank
bunch
you.
of seconds. Do we have any other discussion on the budget at this time? Can I get a roll call vote?
Mr. Binder?
Yes.
Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Mr. Falzarano? Yes? Gotcha. Tired yes.
He was at the gym.
Mrs. Fechner?
Yes.
Mr. Horowitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Mandel?
Yes.
Mr. Pappy?
Yep.
Mr. Sun?
Yes.
Dr. Yaget?
Yes.
Dr. Seelig?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you all.
We don't have any other business. I would just, in closing, just like to thank the Finance Committee, yourself especially, who spent an incredible amount of time going through the budget and the numbers, and Tim and Fran, the entire administrative team, which I know sweated bullets sometimes to bring the cost down to where it needs to be. So, thank you, and with that, can I get a...
You need a motion?
This is the second opportunity for the public to comment.